webinar. A couple of things about the webinar today. I guess first I should probably share my screen so you can see what we're all looking at. I'm going to go through, the planning project. We're going to go through kind of the idea of the planning project, the setup of a planning project, and of course the functionality of the planning project. If there are any questions or, things along the way, I will stop at logical points along the way and ask if people have any questions or anything like that. You can pose your questions in the chat. So just keep that in mind, that as I'm going through the process and the everything like that, I'll get to a stopping point. I'll stop. I'll read through. You can type the questions in the chat at any time, but I'll read through them kind of at that stopping point and then answer the questions as we go along. And then we'll have, of course, a couple of minutes at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you guys might have. So here we go, planning project. So I did tell you that I'd give you a kind of the idea of the planning project, and the planning project again is a way for you to plan or allocate your people or your services, right? You can forecast out work for a client if you need to, or again, you can forecast out work for your people for a client, or just make plans of forecasting that time. This all came about twofold, right? As people came to us and said, we do retainers, but our retainers are based on hours and not dollars. And another one is, again, the ability to forecast work, right? You have a client that says, I have work for you for a year. I'm anticipating about this much time or anything like that. How do we forecast that information out? And that's where, again, the two of those came together to be the planning project. Okay. So here there's no special setup that needs to be done with the planning project. You'll see again under project manager that I do have a planning project bubble menu right here. And you can, of course, click the plus sign to start a new planning project. My chat window is kind of in the way. What I'm going to do is, planning project is a project. It's a project that has some different functionalities and different, intentions, of course, with the project. But the base of it is a project. So when it comes down to that, just so you know, I'm really going to point out some of the differences between setting up a planning project versus a project. But certain things are the same. You're going to create a planning project for a client, right? We have client, we have the primary contact, and then we have our project name. We'll just say planning project 1. We do have the ability to copy from another plan. You'll notice I don't have the ability to copy from a template. We don't need to templatize this because we're not looking at a project schedule at this point in time. We're really looking at the allocation and forecasting of hours, by person or by service here. So you can create a planning project by copying from an existing one if you already have one in your system. Other than that, we're pretty much going to be creating these from scratch. Also, one of the big differences in a planning project is the fact that we do require a start date, but we also require a due date, right? So we actually have to have two date options in here. Unlike a regular project, you aren't required to fill out both dates. So again, the idea of the planning project, it doesn't have to be, you can use the planning project however you want to, but the idea of that is we're looking at long-term, maybe a 3-month, 6-month, 1-year contract with the client. So we can put this information in, and I'm just gonna do mine through the end of May, and I'm gonna hit save. Okay, so that's again just the basic setup of the planning project. And when you come in here, it looks generally like a regular project with a few differences in play, right? The number one difference, of course, is we don't have schedule and estimate as two separate areas. We have a schedule and estimate as one area. And then another difference we have down here is linked projects, which we'll talk about in just a minute. I'm going to double check to see. This is one of my stopping points. I'm just going to double check to see if anyone had any questions before I move on to the next part, I think. Somebody was asking if this can be done in opportunities, and currently no. There's no way to convert an opportunity to a planning project, so there isn't a way to have the opportunity forecast out those allocation of hours at this time. So there we go. Oh, somebody's just mentioning that I have more options beneath purchase orders than they do. And that's just because, again, I have media. This is a test site on mine. So I might have more rights because I'm a full admin, or I might have things activated in my test system that you might not have in your current system. For instance, I have broadcast orders and insertion orders because I might have media activated. And then and again, there might be some things that are turned on here, like the burn chart. Right. So these are just, again, functions that are in your Workamajig. They're not anything special on mine. They just might be things that I have turned on or activated in my Workamajig versus yours. So that was another question that they had. Going into this, I'm going to skip schedule estimate right away because we actually have something new in this webinar that we haven't had in my previous planning project webinars. Is under project settings, we now have a new feature in the planning project. So originally when the planning project came out, the planning project, you have, we'll go look at the schedule, but you were able to assign a user and a service, right? And use the planning project. Again, maybe you have an account manager that gets allocated 5 hours a week, for the length of the contract for this client, and you would be able to allocate that time to a specific person and things like that. Now we have two settings for our planning project. One is the standard setting, which is going to be, we just assign services for our forecasting of our allocations of hours, right? And that's how, if you create a brand new planning project today, that's exactly how it's going to work. But if you do want to use that other option that I told you about, we want to assign a person hours, allocate hours to a person per day, per week, you can do and allow people to be assigned. So again, if you create that brand new planning project and you're not allowing people to, you don't see people being able to be assigned, it's because you need to come into the project settings and set that right there. Also, if we assign people to this, we have a feature that says automatically roll over unused hours. These will make a little bit more sense, of course, when I get back into that schedule estimate screen, which I'm going to do, right now. We'll come back and revisit this, but I'll just check those two right there. And what that means for me is when I go into my schedule estimate screen, right? And I add an assignment, I have these two boxes here, which means I have the ability to assign a person and a service, right? So again, kind of that idea to say, I'm, allocating a certain amount of time, an account manager's time to this client. It might not be project specific, right? There could be multiple projects going on and they just need, I want to hold on to this time for them. I want to allocate so I don't over allocate work to them, but it's not necessarily, it's client specific, not project specific. So you can come in and you can pick your person and you can put in your account manager time here. You also can, just so you know, you can do a percentage of assigned time, a total number of hours, or you can just manually bucket the time per week. So I'm just going to show you, the difference between these, of course, is if I say percentage of assigned, it's looking at a 40-hour week, right? And, and it's taking the length of this project and it's going to do that math for me. So if I say, well, I want 20% of Yosemite Sam's time to be spent on account management on this client, I can put in my 20% and it goes through and it calculates this information for me. Now this week, of course, we're already at Wednesday, right? So it does the math and says, okay, this week, again, we'll do the math, 4.8 hours, where then, the rest we're allocating out 8 hours a week for the length of the project, right? And this information will feed into my Creative Today page, right, where they can do their time entry. And this information, of course, will fill out the staff schedule screen. So again, that we see that they are booked for 8 hours a week, for the length of this project. So when we are allocating and assigning future work to them, we're not, we're including that 8 hours a week as time already booked, right? Now, again, like I said, you can come in here and you can go in and manually assign time. If you wanted to go through the length of that, type in 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. If you wanted it to be 5 hours, right? You can certainly do that too. Okay. So that's how you can do that. You can, of course, have multiple assignments on here, right? So I can certainly come in here and I can say, well, you know what, Daffy Duck, we have there, this client also has some media planning. And this again is where I was saying is I could say, well, that's going to be 5 hours a week. maybe 2 times a month, right? Like maybe they don't do 5 hours a week every week. They just have to do 5 hours a week, every month or something like that. So you could go in and you can assign and allocate, this time that way if you wanted to do that, right? So that, that's another option. Again, you don't have to go through and have them have time each and every week. Again, this information does feed into their Creative Today, and it also feeds into the staff schedule screen to show this allocation. All right. Another feature that we have here, again, this might be the assignment. Might be where they're putting their time. This is the work that they have. They know exactly what goes into that media planning, 5 hours, every week, or that account management. That's, again, where they're bucketing their time. Is you can click on more, and you can click on create estimate, and you can create an estimate based off of this time here, right? So this, it was 158 hours total, which, again, depending on the rate structure that you use and everything, came out to that $19,750. So if I need to sit there and say, well, your media planning for this quarter or 6-month period, and your account management comes out to 19,750, you can supply them an estimate of this time for billing purposes, or whatever purpose you need. So you can, of course, do that. And this is a project, right? So keep that in mind, that this might be all that you're building for them right now. You don't know exactly what other projects are coming down the line for them, but you know that you're booking this time for them. So just keep that in mind, that this is a true project. Time entry, right? I can even estimate expenses if you think there's going to be expenses against this. So there's no difference in how this is going to work. The difference is, again, how we're setting this up. So I can approve this estimate. Okay. All right. So again, now I have a budget, right? Now I have a budget on my planning project here. Now, the one thing I can't demonstrate, of course, right now, because we'd all have to be on this call for the rest of the week until Monday. So we're not going to do that. But just keep in mind that, again, the idea of this is that Yosemite Sam here can start, and I will show you this, of course, putting hours against this project. So what happens, though, with, the question always was, what happens if Yosemite Sam only does 3 hours worth of work this week and they were allocated 4.8 hours, right? Well, that's where that automatically, roll the unused time, right? So if you do not check that, then Yosemite Sam worked 3 hours this week, and that's that, right? If you do check that, then starting next week, the unused hours from this week will then appear in this week, right? So this week will then have 9.80 hours, right? Again, not anything I can demonstrate right here on that call, but you can always, test that theory in your system if you wanted to do that. But the unused hours will roll if you check that box. If you don't, they stay where they belong. Another, little bit different here is we can't really do a simple reassign on a planning project, right? Because we have all these allocations out for the week and everything like that. So you can't simply say just reassign this task to another. You can if you need to, but what we do in the planning project is if you click on the line, you'll see that there's a pencil, right? And on that pencil, it'll give me the ability to do kind of a handoff. Because what I'm really going to do is I really still want Yosemite Sam to do the account management, but Yosemite Sam gets to go on vacation. So I can actually sit there and say, well, I want to reassign to Foghorn Leghorn, but I only need to reassign this 1 week, right? Like, because they're just going to be on vacation that 1 week. And I can hit save. And what the system will do is it creates that other line, right? And everything is 0 except for that 1 week. So you'll see that Yosemite Sam here, it still has their 8 hours per week, except for that 1 week they're on vacation. And that time has moved to Foghorn Leghorn, right? So again, we're just telling the system where those allocations should go. All right, so that's the schedule screen of what it looks like, again, on our planning project. I'm gonna stop here briefly and let people, I'm gonna see, I think I have a couple questions in this QA. I'm not sure, give me a second. All right, so someone's asking if the project hasn't started officially, should the plan be in a pending or production status? So that just depends on, like, again, where you want this information to show. If it hasn't started officially, then it should be in a status that is inactive. So it does not necessarily show up in like people's Creative Today page. You can run your resource management tools for inactive projects or projects in a specific status. So again, if you're using the planning project for forecasting time, you know, and allocations and things like that, you would just need to make sure that you're running your staff schedule screen to include the status that the project is in. All right, so hopefully that helped. And we're going to talk, someone's asking about how do you link a planning project to an existing project, and I'm going to show you that, guys, that in just a minute. Yep. All right, so I'm going to come just out of here, out of the schedule. And one thing I wanted to point out, of course, is I just want to say, you know, we do, if we're ready to start and everything like that, we would, you know, change our status to an active status so that our planning project starts to you know, fill out, again, the Creative Today page. It starts to fill out my staff schedule screen when I'm looking at all my active, you know, and ongoing projects. So what it looks like when that happens, right, is, you know, what does it look like throughout the system is, of course, if I go to my Creative Today page, right, you can see no matter what view you're in, you can see the planning project, and you can see, again, I haven't worked, but here's my hours remaining this week, right? You know, so you would be able to see that information here. And then, of course, you know, in our resource manager, staff schedule screen, you would be able to see, again, the allocations in that staff schedule screen. I always, you know, when I'm demonstrating the planning project, I'm always looking at things kind of like in that week view if I needed to, right? Because again, that kind of corresponds to my weekly buckets, but you can see the allocations here. Okay. So again, that's how it's populating and it's forecasting that information out. Now, remember too, you can look at your, you know, your staff schedule screen even further out, right? So you would be able to see how this information would translate out. So you would be able to, again, kind of see Daffy Duck with the 5 hours, you know, on specific weeks. And of course, Foghorn Leghorn has just that 1 8-hour information out here. Okay, so again, that's how that information is, you know, pulling out from that planning project right there. Now you'll notice again, a couple things is I do have that planning project dot with my planning project dashboard, as we might call it, right? You can incorporate the planning project into your regular project window here also, right? You'll notice my planning project shows up here, and that's simply going to be under your more system settings where you can say include planning projects, because again, they're a project, they can incorporate themselves with the other projects and, you know, and be within that dashboard. So you can keep them separate if you so choose to, but they can show up within either one of those dots, right? And then I can access it from here. Now, you know, again, one of the things that we're doing here is, I said, well, you know, they're doing 8 hours of account management a week. Yosemite Sam is doing 8 hours of account management per week, you know, and again, they might not have any specific work for that. They know what they're doing. They have those 8 hours, but if you have a reason for them, a specific reason that or what they need to do those 8 hours, right? I have some work for you to do. I need those 8 hours to be used this way, this week, right? Then you can go into this linked projects here, and you can go to more, and you can go to projects, and you can create a linked project. So again, those 8 hours are, you're just doing account management work. Now I say, well, the client came and said to me that they need, and, you know, and we'll just say, you know, you can pick any template that you want on here, but you can say, okay, but they said that they needed this work done this week, and, you know, and we're going to use those hours, right? So when I create a project, this is now a regular project. The difference is this one is linked to my planning project, right? What will happen with this one is if I go into the schedule screen here, and I have my account management right here on my first task, right? And it's scheduled at the same time as my planning project. You know, if I say, well, that account management is going to be done by Yosemite Sam, right? You know, and again, we would probably assign everything all the way through but we only have limited time on our webinar, but I assign that to Yosemite Sam, and then this project gets activated, right? So what happens now with that is I have linked project in the system. I have a schedule of tasks that need to be done on a project, but it will go through. And if I go back into my planning project here and I go into my schedule estimate, right, with my Yosemite Sam, you now see that my planning project only has 2.8 hours allocated to it. And if I click on this line, that's because 2 hours of that planning project time was allocated to another project. All right. So when the planning project is using people and I link projects to it, as long as the assignment matches like for like, then it will use those allocated hours from the planning project. And if I go, and I will do this, if I go out to my staff schedule screen or I go out to my creative to date page, then those will reflect the 2 separate assignments, 2.8 hours on my planning project, and then 2 hours on my other project. So if I go into my creative today page, sorry, my chat is in my way, you would be able to see again those 2 assignments, right? So you're able to see that information here. Okay. So that's kind of how that works. And again, I should have probably stayed on that screen to begin with because it always takes a second to load. But my staff schedule screen still shows that I'm allocated 4.8 hours, right? Because that didn't change at all. But you'll be able to see the breakdown of it, that it shows now that 2 of those hours are for my, 1 project, and my 2.8 is still for my planning project. Okay, so that's how the linked projects work when we're allowing people, right, on the planning project. It's going to be slightly different when we do service only, which I will show you in just a moment. But a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about with the planning project. By the way, you can always click on the linked projects and see that information there, if you need to do that. A couple things I wanted to talk about though, under the project settings, you'll notice things are a little bit different here, like I mentioned before, but now things make a little bit more sense when I say allow people to be assigned and allow the rollover of unused hours, right? We've seen the schedule, so that makes sense. Our accounting tab is pretty much exactly the same, right? Some people are setting up these planning projects as non-billable projects. We all have some work we have to do each week, and we don't account for that, right? So everyone looks like they have a full 40. So you can, of course, account for some non-billable time each week. If, hey, everyone has to spend 5 hours a week updating something, you can certainly do that. What makes things a little bit different on the planning project is going to be this billing method. Right? So the billing method in the planning project, we didn't totally reinvent the wheel, but we changed a couple of things here. So first of all, if we're just going to be using the planning project as, again, kind of that time entry and, managing the assignment, then we could say bill only the plan. And really what that means is we're going to do our billing from the planning project, right? All of their time entry, or again, maybe we're just billing the estimate. That's what we're going to do. We're billing from the planning project. Okay, great. And then we have the ability to say, well, I'm going to bill the plan and the project separately. And that has to do with your linked project. So if you bill the plan and the project separately, it could be that you're billing, let's say the planning project, your fixed fee, the estimated amount, that $19,750. And then you're using your separate projects or your linked projects, right? For maybe time and materials or something like that. So if you say bill the plan and project separately, then when billing, when you do your mass billing or anything like that, then all of the projects will show up to bill, right? And you'll bill according to their billing method. So this is just saying, I'm going to ignore the linked projects for billing purposes, right? And I'm going to bill the planning project based on whatever setting I select. This is saying, nope, we're going to bill them all as their own project, right? And we're going to look at the billing method of each one, and we're going to bill accordingly. So if I'm billing the plan here, my options for this are really only time and materials and fixed fee, right? So if I'm billing time and materials, then we're billing the actuals. If I'm billing fixed fee, then we generally would say, let's put in a billing schedule, because this is a long-term project, right? And I've got this $19,750, and how do I want to break this up? So I can add a schedule, and I can say, well, I want to bill, in 4 increments or something. I could say I want to bill 25%. We'll just say today, right? And then we can just copy that and say, oops, let's let it think, March, April, and May, right? That's where we're going to do our billing. And that's, again, how our mass billing in Workamajig is going to figure out what amount it's going to bill and when. Okay, so that's the big difference. Maybe no one cared or no one caught it, but the big difference on the planning project is we do not have a retainer billing method, right? If you're thinking that you wanted to bill your planning project, kind of retainer based or in some form or fashion in that way, then you would bill fixed fee and build a billing schedule, just like you would have a retainer schedule of billing, right? But the added bonus to a billing schedule, right, is the fact that I can actually set one up and say, create this one as an advance bill, or I can modify my amounts. Maybe, the one thing that we get a lot from people is they say, I like to either front load my billing or, bill less in the beginning and more at the end or something like that. So the billing schedule fixed fee gives you that flexibility to do that. So again, that's the difference when it comes to billing the planning project. When you go to bill the planning project, it doesn't look any different, right? There's no difference in billing. The time entries will show the same. Your estimate will show the same. You won't notice any difference when billing the planning project versus a standard project in Workamajig. Okay. Oh, I will save my changes. There we go. All right, so I am going to stop there. I am going to create one more planning project today, and that's going to be the service only one, which I'll link some projects to it. And then we'll, and again, I'll just explain the small differences between the service only one versus the one that we allow people. I'm just going to double check for some questions. So someone is asking, what are the benefits of making a planning project over an opportunity? It really just comes down to the flexibility or the ease of creating the allocations for a long-term project. So, when you're creating an opportunity, generally that opportunity will have a project linked to it, and that project would be a standard project with kind of the waterfall type effect of project management, where again, the planning project allows you to generate, that forecast of allocations for long-term type projects. And then I'm just reading the last question. Sorry, what flag were you referring to in resource logs? Less time than planned for that week. Oh, they don't want their time to roll over. So that would be in the project settings in the planning project. If you have to check the box, allow people to be assigned. Once you check that box, then the automatically roll over unused hours will appear. And if you do not want them to roll over, then you just deselect. It's deselected by default, so you don't even have to select it. So then you can, say, okay, automatically roll over the unused hours, and it will roll over that allocation within the schedule screen of the planning project. Is rollover remaining hours available on monthly maintenance jobs? I'm not, if you're talking like if you have a job that has a task like that's January, and a task that's February, a task that's March, April, May, no, the allocated hours stay within that task on that timeline. So, but yeah, so if you don't want them to roll over, do not select that box. Okay, so we're going to create one more planning project here. So I'm going to go out to my planning project area here and create another one. And we're just going to, this will be my planning project 2, because I'm super creative with my naming conventions. And we'll just do kind of the same thing here. But this time when I hit save and I look at my project settings, I am not going to select the option to allow people to be assigned. Right? There's not going to be a huge difference, just so you know, in case anyone's wondering like what's about to happen. The difference is when I go into my schedule here and I add an assignment, I do not have the person box, right? So what that, does, of course, is I can then pick my service here, and I can again pick my percent of assigned, right? And I bring that over. So again, I just made it similar, so we're all very familiar with this. What is the benefit to this, right? So I can still, just so you know, I can still estimate my hours. I can still, do the billing from here if I needed to, based off my estimate and things like that. The benefit and bonus of only doing a service one here is I'm not specifically saying what person will be providing this service at the planning project level, right? So I'm going to activate this. It doesn't affect my Creative Today page, right? Because nobody's assigned to that, but it will show when I have that service assigned. Let me just refresh my screen here, but it will show when I have that service assigned down here. So I can see that I have unassigned services that are lingering out there, right? And that I will need to have somebody supply that service at some point in time. And the idea when we put in the planning project to have the service only is that we would then rely, or, you know, that the idea is that you would rely on the linked projects to actually divvy out the work, right? The benefit to this though, is that when I go in and I allocate, you know, I go in, I link that project and I allocate that work, it doesn't matter who I assign to that service, right? So I can go into this schedule screen and I can say, well, for here, you know, the account management, this, you know, I can say, this is going to be, you know, Foghorn Leghorn is doing this account management here, and I'll save that. And then I can say, let me just activate this one. And then I can actually link another project. And I'm just, so again, I know I'm kind of doing this willy-nilly, but I mean, I just want you guys to see the idea is that I can create this, you know, same kind of project, but on this one, the account manager might be, who haven't I picked on yet? I don't think I've picked on Bugs Bunny, right? So even though I have two separate people doing account management on these linked projects, it's still going to use the allocation from the schedule in here, right? So the difference between this is, again, when I assigned people, if I linked a project, it had to be like by like. I mean, it had to be Yosemite Sam performing account management or else, right? Or else it didn't use the allocation from the planning project. But in this one, I can say I can have multiple linked projects with different account managers performing that same duty. And as long as I link the project and that service matches what was in my, you know, in my planning project, then it's using that allocation. So again, this is the idea of this one is I'm just saying I know that they need account management work. You know, again, I kind of 8 hours a week, let's just say. I don't know how we're going to use it yet, but I want to get that on my resource management to say, this is how they're, you know, we're allocating time out. We don't know how we're using it. Now we know how we're using it. So I can go in and I can create these projects and I can pull that allocation out from my planning project. And then, you know, and then we would be able to, again, see what hasn't been used on those existing projects. So this is just a different form of that. So this is, again, if you don't have a plan in place on who is going to be doing the work, then you can set your planning project up this way. So somebody was asking, it's a good time because I think I'm kind of done with that one, but if it looks like you have to create a new project from a template each time, you do not. You can go in just like if you were linking a project to a campaign or something like that, when you go into your project, right? When you go into your regular everyday project, I was just doing it the fast and easy way, but project settings is you do have this planning project field and you can create a project and link it back to a planning project, right? So it's not a what comes first type thing. I mean, the planning project kind of has to come first, but you don't have to create it from the planning project. I just did because, again, I guess less of me flying across, you know, zooming around Workamajig, making people dizzy or anything like that. So again, you know, there's the same features, same functionality with whether you're using people or service, except for the simple fact of how do you plan on allocating that work out. Again, there's two different methods here of, you know, my people will be putting their time against the planning project because they're working those 8 hours of account management a week. That's more of a bucket versus I just want to plan ahead to know that this client is going to use 20% of my account manager's time. I don't know who that account manager is. I just know it's 20% of their time. And then when we do know what account manager will be doing the work, we can use those allocations as they come across. Okay. So I think that is my planning project webinar. I will leave the webinar open for a few more minutes. If you guys have any questions or concerns, I'll let you know ahead of time. I'm a little behind on updating the help guide on the service only planning planning project, and also the rolling over the unused hours, but I promise you I'll get there eventually. And if you do have further questions or further concerns, or you want to walk through it, maybe, you know, more in scenarios for you, don't hesitate to schedule a call with your account manager so that they can talk you through, you know, some of these areas and items again, you know, because it's Workamajig. So we always have some options to talk about when it comes to these areas. All right. I will leave it open for, again, a couple minutes. I'll leave it open for some questions. So please put them in the chat if you have them. So if someone is asking if hours are allocated more than what was noted in the planning view, how is that represented? I mean, it will just, again, that information will, the planning project, I think will kind of, at one point in time it was going negative. I honestly can't see, I can certainly take a look if we're going to use that, but it won't warn you. It won't stop you. You can use as many allocated hours as you want. So let's just create one more because it changed on what we were doing. So give me 1 second while I go into my planning project 2. We'll link one more project. I know what I'm getting into on this one. So I know I'm using the same one over and over, but I know what it has. Let's see. We'll make Daffy Duck do account management on this one. Save. I guess I didn't need to go that far. Yeah, so it went negative, and then this one is positive. And just so you know, to everybody who's, again, thinking about this, the planning project is a newer feature. You know, it's been around the shortest amount of time versus most of the other areas in Workamajig. So if you start using it, we would definitely love some feedback on how you think it's going and how, and also we would love feedback on how you're using it. So if you do send in an enhancement suggestion about it, always give us a use case for that and how you're using the planning project and why that change would be beneficial, you know, to you and everybody else who uses the planning project, because that really helps us get a better understanding of, you know, where we're putting in those enhancements and if, you know, what direction it's going in. So don't be afraid. Like I said, it is newer. We're always looking for some really, you know, good feedback, even if it's, you know, critical. You know, we're always looking for that information. So don't hesitate to do that. And I'm going to double check it again with the question. So someone's just asking, what is the key benefit of using planning projects? So again, one of the, yeah, they're asking, you know, how much time will be consumed throughout the year on projects that are coming up alongside projects that are already in progress. Correct. It's kind of a way for you to forecast out allocations and use of how you think things are going to go. So, you know, we have revenue forecasting, right? You know, one of the things we didn't really have is resource forecasting, and that's really what the planning project is for. Plus, again, we kind of put that, it's for, you know, resource forecasting out. You know, you talk to a client and they tell you, oh, we're going to have a lot of work for you this year, and great, you know, let me put in, at least get ready for that, right? And put that in there. So when we're bringing other projects in, that we can see our availability for our users or our services that we provide. And again, another area behind that was, well, I have a retainer. I have a year-long retainer. I don't base my retainer necessarily on dollars. It's based on hours. And we promise them 20 hours a month for, you know, 12 months. Okay, well, we can build that into the planning project and we can set up a billing schedule accordingly, right? And, you know, some people say, well, but I don't know what service and things. Well, you know, generally, again, you know, you would have an idea of those hours versus dollars, right? Because hours in Workamajig tend to be dollars, right? So that was the idea. That's kind of, again, where those two areas came together for us, was retainers based on hours and not dollars, in a way, and then forecasting our resources besides just forecasting our revenue. All right. I'm going to leave it open for a couple more minutes. And if anybody wants to put in another question, but please, again, if you don't want to ask the question on chat, if you have some time to think about it, if you want to go into your Workamajig and do some things with, practice with that planning project, do not hesitate to email support@workamajig.com. We're absolutely happy to answer those questions for you on this topic. All right, I'm going to give it, like I said, get 2 more minutes and then I'm going to close the webinar, but please, again, don't be a stranger. Questions or concerns, you can definitely email us. Okay, yes, if you start a planning project now, you can link an existing project to it. Just keep in mind that the planning project and the linked project, it's going to use the allocation from the appropriate week, right? So again, mine worked out well because I created a brand new project today for a planning project I created today. But if you have a project that's ongoing and you create a planning project today, right, the allocations from that project will be used for the appropriate week in the planning project. Not sure if I'm saying that right, but again, if the week is March 28th to April 3rd, then on your, for a future date on your existing project, then that's where the allocation will come out of on the planning project. All right, you guys, I am going to thank you all for being here and close out this webinar. Again, questions or concerns that I might not have answered, please don't hesitate to email support@workamajig.com and we will be happy to answer them for you. You guys have a fantastic day.